So moving on to our last speaker for this afternoon is Chiara Saccone. So Chiara, whenever you're ready, the Zoom is yours. And everybody feel free as any time as always to leave questions and comments in the chat section. Thank you.
Hi everybody. I'm very glad to be here and happy to share my work on a very specific piano repertoire that I have done in the last few years. And I would like to ask Thomas to share my PowerPoint. Thank you, perfect. So I will present today my work on Metodo per suonare il pianoforte by Giuseppe Chiari, an Italian composer. I started working on his performances and compositions in 2012, when during my studies I met the pianist and composer Frederic Rzewski, who told me enthusiastically about him. Initially, I worked on some of his more performative works, and only in 2019 I started working on the piano repertoire. I played in several occasions Gesti sul piano from 1962 and Metodo per suonare il pianoforte from 1964. In the last few years, I also performed contemporary music pieces in which gestures, actions, and words are equal to sounds, even though these scores from the 60s had a unique and profound effect on my relationship with my instrument, the piano, the instrument I've played all my life. So now, before talking about the pieces, I was to spend just a few words on Giuseppe Chiari, and we can move to the next slide. Giuseppe Chiari was a composer and a visual artist. He was born in Florence in 1926 from a working-class family. He studied mathematics and engineering at the University of Florence without graduating. Meanwhile, he played piano as a self-taught, and since the late 40s, he was involved in the jazz and improvisation scene in Florence. He was also particularly influenced by the ideas of John Cage and George Maciunas. His work as composer and performer is part of the multiplicity of experiences gathered around the Fluxus movement. In fact, and we can move to the next slide, in 1962, Frederic Rzewski played his piece Gesti sul piano at the Fluxus Internationale Festspiele Neuester Musik in Wiesbaden. Gesti sul piano is a verbal and graphic score in which Chiari describes accurately the gestures of the pianist on the keyboard and on the strings. Each gesture has a precise tempo noted in seconds next to the verbal score. As you can see from the picture, the score is very simple paper. On the right side, you can find the verbal notation, and on the left side, you can find signs that schematize the actions. And in the middle, you can find the exact duration of the actions. In this case, it was like 6 seconds for all the page. So the piano is not prepared, and the sound of the instrument is quite traditional. But the attitude of the pianist is totally unconventional. What is conventional is the relationship between the composer and the performer, as the score lists instructions that the pianist has to follow to play the piece. Between 1962 and 1964, a big change happened as Chiari started to perform himself his works. And in this period, he wrote a series of methods for playing boxes, chairs, waters to play a room, guitar, cello, piano, among the others. As you can see in the next slide, I think the one in which is written method, yes, this one. The score of Metodo per suonare il pianoforte, which is the one in the picture, is quite similar to the one of Gesti sul piano. You can see you have a verbal notation and also signs that schematize the actions. But there is a huge difference because methods are not pieces. There is no information about the durations of the actions and no information about the order of the events. A method is a particular procedure for accomplishing or approaching something, especially a systematic or established one. In fact, Chiari studied the morphological peculiarity of a material with a systematic, almost scientific approach in order to develop the musical potential of the material itself. and so he studied the properties of the piano. He did not put himself in relationship with the historical piano repertoire. He approached the instrument as a person, and we can move to the next slide, as a person who does not know the existence of keys. The keyboard for him is a long white strip. However, he understood that his hands, his arms, can leave an imprint on the keyboard as well as on the sound. This is the phrase that is written at the beginning of the version of Metodo per suonare il pianoforte, which is included in a book that collects all the methods and was published in 1976. So as a trained pianist, I had to forget all my technique. I had to spend time on my own instruments, learning a new set of gestures and using my body differently. I first approached the score of Gesti sul piano, and then I studied Metodo per suonare il pianoforte. So as the score of Gesti sul piano is written in French, as Chiara used this language to communicate with the international community of artists in the 60s, my first step was translating the instructions into Italian. So at the very beginning, I just imagined the actions abstractly. My only support was given by a series of pictures that Chiara himself did of his hands on the keyboard, as the one that you can see in this slide, and a video in which he plays some of the actions. Once I got the score of Metodo per suonare il pianoforte, in which Chiara enlarged the number of gestures and described them in Italian, and that was a huge help for me, I started working on the piano. Inspired by the image of the imprint in the sand and by the pictures of Chiara's hands, I worked for weeks filming my hands and watching the videos without sounds, focusing on the image. As you can see in the next slide, I have done several videos like this one that I want to share with you. I was particularly attracted by the plasticity of the keyboard in response of the touch of my hands. And really, for the very first time, watching these videos, after spending millions of hours practicing watching my fingers since I was a child, I can say I really saw my hands. I used to alternate studying the pieces in my mind, looking at the score and imagining the series of actions, practicing on the instruments, and practicing everywhere, like on a table, on my bed. And for example, as you can see in the next slide, and in the first video, I was practicing on the train. And only after some time, I recorded myself whole length while playing. And as you can see in the next video, then I started also listening the sounds that I was playing.
I seem to have a problem. I can't get this. There it is. There we go. Sorry. Sorry, Chiara.
While practicing, my focus was entirely on the visual element. While learning the gestures, I always focused on the actions and rarely thought about the resulting sounds. I never tried to control the sound. Getting into the metodo per suonare il pianoforte, I started enjoying the gestures. I started feeling my resonating body. I had to learn new boundaries. I had to moderate my strength not to get hurt. I had to work on the immobility of my body while freezing for playing the silence. I realized and I accepted that my body changes and that this influences my playing. I lent myself in the process of learning. I played Chiara's game and I took it seriously. In conclusion, I want to share the last slide. For the first time in my pianistical life, I learned a piano piece with my eyes before that with my ears. I memorized the dance of the gestures and I accepted that I would know how the piece sounds only during the performance. And this is the process through how I quit classic music. So now, as the last part of my performance paper, I want to share with you my first performance of Metodo per suonare il pianoforte. It was in May 2019, and I was guest at the University of Gorizia. In Gorizia, there is a group of researchers. There is a department of video art, and they are preparing videos in which Chiari plays gesti sul piano, or just play his gestures, and they are creating a video archive that is interesting. And also, I particularly love this video that I want to share with you because my hands were filmed while I was playing and reprojected exactly in the same way as Chiari used to do during his performances. So now, if Thomas could share the last video.